Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on weighing the cost of data security and why it's important for businesses of all sizes. My name is Cassandra Hackett, and I'm a Product Marketing Manager at Comodo Cybersecurity, and I'll be your host for today's session. First, we have a few housekeeping updates before I introduce today's speakers. First, we'll be recording today's session, and it will be available on demand at Comodo's Bright Talk channel. At any time during the presentation, you can enter a question into the queue, and we'll have time at the end of today's presentation to take your questions live. There's also an attachment available for you to download, as well as the link to our webpage. So feel free to download the attachment now or at the end of today's session. At this time, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. We have Chase Cunningham with Forrester, who primarily contributes to Forrester's offerings for security and risk professionals. His research guides client initiatives related to security operations center planning and optimization, counter threat operations, encryption, network security, and zero trust concepts and implementation. Prior to joining Forrester, Chase served as a director of cyber threat intelligence operations at Armor. He holds a PhD and a master's degree in computer science from Colorado Technical University and a bachelor's degree from American Military University, where he focused on counterterrorism operations in cyberspace. Chase is a retired U.S. Navy chief with more than 19 years of experience in cyber forensic and cyber analytic operations, and has also spent time in work centers with the NSA, CIA, FBI, and other government agencies. Welcome today, Chase. John McIntosh is an enterprise systems engineer with Comodo Cybersecurity. John has been a systems engineer for over 10 years in the security field. He's previously worked with other cybersecurity firms such as Centrify, bringing trust to devices, users, and applications, as well as Barracuda Networks, where he helped work on a wide range of perimeter defense technologies. Welcome today, John. With that, I'll pass things over to Chase to begin today's session.
Hey, well, thank you for having me. Really appreciate being here and having the opportunity to talk about small business security. And my portion, really, we're going to talk about moving beyond the FUD, and I'll sort of describe what I mean by FUD. And what we're talking about there is the fear, the uncertainty, and doubt that is pretty prevalent in the industry. We sort of live in a world where you can't go more than about 8 seconds without the news cycle telling you that something bad is happening, and especially in cybersecurity. Last year was the year of billion-plus breaches and probably more. You literally can't take 5 minutes and get away from all the fear and uncertainty and doubt that is constantly being thrown at us. And the reality of that is that it's necessary. We need to be aware that there are bad things going on. But, I mean, let's face it, this industry has been established. We've been doing cyber operations and cybersecurity for a while now. So it's time to sort of really focus more on strategic initiatives and moving away from chasing things that aren't actually going to make things better for anyone. I'll give you a sort of tangential scenario around FUD that it has nothing to do with cybersecurity, but actually seems to get people to understand, why FUD, F-U-D, fear, uncertainty, and doubt is so bad. So here's a couple of images about FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And on the left, there you have a mosquito. And on the right, you have a great white shark. Now, most people, when you see a mosquito, you really don't freak out about it. You just kind of think, okay, that's a bad thing. Mosquitoes cause problems. I'm not going to be happy if it flies around and buzzes in my ear, and I'm dang sure not going to be happy if it lands on me and and starts drinking blood and whatever else. But most people aren't categorically afraid or stressed about mosquitoes. You don't see newspaper articles and movies, made about mosquitoes. There's never been a blockbuster hit called Death by Mosquito or anything like that. On the right-hand side, you have a great white shark. Now, obviously, everyone that was born after, the 70s has seen Jaws, and anyone that gets in the water at any time, anywhere, I can guarantee you at least for a quarter of a second, if not more, you hear that music in your head of dun dun, and I've never even seen a great white shark in my entire life personally. I've seen sharks in the water before swimming, things like that, but I've never been around a great white. However, I will tell you, I don't like being in the water in the ocean because I always think about that one of those things could be in there. So I mean, that's a perfect example of FUD. I've never even seen one of these things. No one I know has ever been attacked. I've just seen movies, and I've seen all the Shark Week stuff and Twitter and whatever else talking about sharks and attacks, but I'm worried about it. I'm freaked out about it. But when you really dial into where the problem actually is with these two entities, mosquitoes kill about 1 million people a year, whereas sharks kill about 20. So, you know, going back to the fear, the uncertainty, and doubt, I'm not really worried about a mosquito. I'm pretty worried about a shark, but it's because of the constant hype cycle and marketing and messaging and sort of terror tactics that go around sharks that I'm worried about it. Whereas a mosquito is much more likely to kill me or cause me to be sick or you know, have a really, really bad day. So in the cyberspace, this is something that we deal with regularly, where people are freaked out and worried about hacks and breaches and compromise and the Russians and the North Koreans, and it just never ends. But the truth of the matter is, when you actually step away from that, the FUD is just FUD. The focus of all this stuff in cyber, all this stuff in security, is actually to be more secure around the data. No one breaks into a bank to say that they're in a building with money. They break into a bank so that they can steal the money and get away with it. That's exactly why they're coming after businesses. So the FUD is there. We're aware of it. Everyone's got it. Sharks will eat you. Mosquitoes can kill you. But the reality of it is we have to figure out a way strategically to wrap our heads around what actually matters, and that's taking care of the data. If you can take care of the data, all of the other stuff is just things that you have to do to take care of the security and be compliant and whatnot. The reality of the problem, the reality of the strategy that you need to adopt is around securing data unequivocally. There's no FUD in that statement. But the problem that we have, in truth, is actually what you see here, in small business especially, where you've got the Jurassic Park scenario. If you remember that movie, they had enough money that they could create dinosaurs out of nothing. They basically brought back the Jurassic period, and they did it with crazy technology and gene research and everything else. But they had one dude running the entire network. It was Newman from Seinfeld. And we all saw how well it worked out for Samuel L. Jackson in the end. And if he can't survive, you know, what hope do the rest of us have? So the reality of where the problem resides for management and for sort of leadership and for technology actually is with this scenario where you've spent all kinds of money on all kinds of things. You've got all kinds of stuff going on, and you have to keep moving at the speed of business. But in reality, you probably have 1 or 2 or 3 people that are either responsible for or may even physically be running, managing, maintaining, and controlling these infrastructures, and it's very, very hard to do. In a small business, you're lucky if you can find a dedicated IT resource. So it's problematic that the FUD is out there as big as it is. It's problematic that we have 1 or 2 or 3 people. Somebody just said, we're in 8 minutes in this, I'm still talking about Hollywood. All right, I guess I'll move on. So, you know, diving into that piece around the strategy side of it, we went out and we asked organizations, you know, hey, is security getting harder or is it getting better for you? In 2015, organizations said, sure, we think we're getting better at this. There was about 400 vendors at RSA. We went back and asked the same question now, 600 plus vendors at RSA and Black Hat, and people say it's getting harder. So does that mean that security is not being solved technically? I don't think so. Categorically, you can't really say that we don't have the technology to solve this problem and be better at security. It's small business, medium-sized, enterprise, whatever. The problem that we have is how we approach the issue and how we use that technology in order to go about actually rendering the issue no longer a problem. If you look at where the breaches have actually occurred in the last few years, all the big things that showed up in the news and have been responsible for all those things within the fear, uncertainty, and doubt sort of paradigm, it didn't start with those big enterprises. It didn't start with the massive, you know, multi-million or hundreds of millions of dollars of security. It started with the small third parties, the vendors, the people that were remoting in. Target, Anthem, Home Depot, OMB, You look at all those major data breaches across history recently, and you'll see that it didn't start with the people that were spending money and had big-time compliance requirements and were really focused on doing security so that they could be secure at speed and at scale. It was those small and mid-sized businesses. And those small and mid-sized businesses wound up becoming, a lot of them went out of business because of the fact that they were involved in these types of breaches. So it matters for them just like it matters for the big guys. And just to back up how big of a problem that can actually be for small businesses to actually be involved in this and have a way to manage, maintain, and control their security and take care of their data, the National Cybersecurity Alliance actually did a study and said those organizations that do get hit during a cyber attack or involved in a cyber attack, they wind up usually losing about $1 million per. So if you're a small business, losing $1 million can literally be what breaks you down from success to failure or even going out of business. It's not really hard to understand that if you're involved in a major breach, if you're where things originated, if you're the avenue for compromise into a target or into an OMB or whatever, from then on, your business may survive the moment of the breach, but the reality of it is you're going to be known for being the avenue of compromise that actually led to that breach, so your business is going to hurt and things are going to get worse for you along the way. It's an uphill battle, which most organizations that wind up being known as the point of origin for these types of compromises ultimately fold or just fail across the board. And a lot of organizations, small and mid-sized, actually say, well, we weren't involved in any breach. We hadn't been hit yet. We've sort of got our fingers crossed, and we think that we can continue to get along without being focused on security, focused on taking care of our data and having security strategy in place. But when you go back and actually do the study and bring the data back to ask, well, were they hit? Most of them will say, well, we think we got hit. 49% say they got hit at least once. When they have the capability to do forensics and look inside their network, they realize that even if they did get away with not being involved in a hack, the bad guys come back. They'll try again. They try repeatedly. And most of the time, once they do get access to those environments, they're there with more than one entity. Most of the bad guys that are causing these compromises aren't doing it solely for their own purposes. Some of them aren't doing it just for the purposes of stealing data. They're reselling that access on the underground because that data that's inside of those systems has value. And so they're able to sit there and say, we're in this network, who wants access to it, do whatever you will with it, use it for a launch point for other attacks and other compromises. And the numbers there are pretty staggering. When you look at 86% of the time, customers had more than one significant attack, also had more than one attacker in their environment. So, even if you happen to get by with not being compromised or not being known for being compromised, when they do come in, which they eventually will, they're going to bring others with them. So you might have 3 or 4 or 5 organizations within a particular breach scenario. It can get really, really bad really, really quickly, and small businesses are not immune to this type of activity. If you abstract away from that a little bit and say, okay, well, if we accept that small businesses are not immune, we accept that we've got to take care of the data, we accept that we've got to change sort of our thinking around security, and we can't throw technology at the problem without strategy behind it. And you ask, well, where do compromises actually occur? Like, where do they originate? Which we did. You can look right here and see we went out and asked, and we said, where do external attacks actually start? Like, where were they carried out? And we asked across manufacturing, retail, utilities, public sector, finances. It comes down to 3 pieces. Ransomware is bad, phishing, and social engineering. So if those 3 are the main types of compromises for businesses across industry and across verticals, well, what's the one common thread that's required for those types of attacks and hacks to take place? It's the individuals that are on the computer. It's the users. Ransomware doesn't work without someone actually clicking, downloading, and operating and using something, activating something. Phishing does not work without a human being being involved in that loop. Social engineering does not work without a user being the avenue of compromise. So there are things that can be put in place to control that strategically to actually make a difference. It doesn't necessarily require a giant focus on all of these things across all of these different pieces of the puzzle. It requires a focus on what actually makes a difference. Obviously, based on the data, that's the human side, but what do humans use that the bad guys get after that causes the news and the data breaches and whatnot? It's the data. So if you can put controls in place around minimizing the threat from ransomware, phishing, social engineering, and the users, and you can put controls in place to know, manage, maintain, and control your data, you've taken care of a massive piece of the security problem, and you actually have controls that will mitigate the threat. Just a couple more things here. It's not, when we start asking organizations like, well, what do you do when you've been breached? And this is large, small, mid. What do you do? Is it the organizations don't act, that they don't go after things, that they don't try and respond? No, they do. But when you look at the data of what they do, you'll see that they try and kind of do everything. It's a shotgun approach. It's trying to stick your fingers in a dam. Most organizations will say that they're going to hire auditors. We'll say that they're going to do updates to network security. They'll say that they're going to try and hire some additional staff, which is interesting because where are they going to get the staff when they probably can't afford them or find them anyway, because cyber is one of the most sort of open areas for people to get jobs. And then they're going to try and do things like, put other controls in place without any actual plan, thinking, or strategy behind it. And what you don't see on here is that organizations dial and fixate on taking care of the data. So there's shotgunning things all across technology. They're shotgunning things all across the space. They're trying to hire people, but you don't see them say, well, we want to dial in on exactly where the compromise was focused and go put controls and technologies and people in place to take care of that, because that's how we get better at this. That's how we secure things. If they would do that, it would make a difference, and it would be more substantial in the way that we're actually able to take care of this problem. So shotgunning it does not actually fix the issue. Not having a strategy in place does not actually help. And chasing compliance with auditors will not make a difference either. If it's not built around taking care of the data and knowing where the bad guys are coming, which is usually from the users and from phishing and social engineering and ransomware and those types of things, it's never going to make a difference. And just to really sort of drive the point home of this problem is not as crazy as people seem to think it is, or that it's hard to solve as people think it is, when you actually go back and ask and say, well, what data were they after when they came in, when they came through those avenues of the users and the ransomware and phishing and social engineering, and when they got into the systems and they resold that avenues and whatever else, like, what did they go after? It hasn't changed. If you look at the data on what the bad guys were after 5 years ago to what they are after now, it's the same thing, with the three at the top being the main ones, with payment and credit card information, PII, and authentication credentials. Those pieces of data are absolutely critical. Why do they go after payment card information and credit card and bank records and things like that? Because they can sell on the underground and make money. Why do they go after PII? Because PII is used for social engineering, PII is used for creating authentication attacks, PII is used for ransomware. And why do they go after authentication credentials? Because they can resell that stuff simply on the underground, and it's much easier to resell someone a username and a password for their purposes of doing malicious stuff than it is to actually do the compromise and do the hacks and whatever else. And it doesn't require them to send any malicious packets. So the point being, it's not that we don't understand this problem. The point being, it's not that it's a difference between enterprise or mid-size or small business. It's not that we don't have the technology in place. It's that the strategies that we put in there typically try and grab technology from across the spectrum, find some sort of compliance requirement, map it to that, cobble it together, and hope that we have a solution in place that will actually keep the bad guys out and will help us be more secure. When in reality, if organizations would back away from that and focus on what matters most and what they can control and what they can have positive command and control of, they would actually make a difference in how they were taking care of their security categorically. It is no longer to focus on the perimeter and to try and keep the bad guys out. They're going to find a way in. What makes the difference is being able to manage, maintain, control, understand, contextualize your data and secure the users and the accesses that are available out there, and then lock it down from the inside out. Because this is ultimately what we're trying to get away from, is that old model of perimeter-based security where you have high fences with some barbed wire on top of it, and sure, it makes you feel like you've got bad guys out there and there's firewalls and there's whatever else, and you think you have a perimeter. But if we accept the reality, not the FUD, the reality of what's going on in this space, that the bad guys will probably find a way in, that they will probably use credentials and things that they bought in the underground and PII, and they will probably target our users so that they can get inside the network and go after our data, either for the purposes of reselling it or for using it for their own purposes. We should be putting controls in place from the inside of the network, focused on taking care of that data by categorizing it, maintaining it, knowing what it does and its value, and encrypting it, and then pushing our way outward. All of the other stuff that you could put in place, be you a big business, small business, whatever, is useless if the data itself is not understood, controlled, and taken care of. Even if you are breached, even if bad guys are in, if they don't get to the data that they're looking for, you still win by default. And that's the point that organizations need to think about in this whole security space, especially small businesses where they don't have that big budget and they don't have that giant capability and they don't have the bodies. Get away from pushing things out to the perimeter and focus on taking care of what matters and where the bad guys are coming, and put controls internal and work your way external and focus on the data, and everything else is just stuff that you can get to later. So that's my section. I hope I didn't beat the Hollywood thing to death too much. Apologize if that was a little bit overboard on the Jurassic Park reference, but hopefully there's some value in that, and I'll kick it over to the Comodo team now.
All right, great. Thanks, Chase. So, hi everyone, this is John McIntosh. I'm going to go ahead and take over from here, and I love the Jurassic Park slide, by the way. So, let's talk about Comodo Dome, data loss prevention. And before we get into that, I want to talk about the types of data compliance that is out there. There's so much data that you can actually protect or that you need to protect in your environment. You know, to start with, there's the General Data Protection Regulation. This is a type of compliance that talks about all types of personal data, you know, social media information, medical info, name, home, email, etc. So this type of very specific data, you might have compliances in your environment to protect that. There's also HIPAA, controlling healthcare information. So your birth dates, you know, DNA, medical numbers, anything like that. So you might have, you know, specific info that, again, you need to protect and that you're compliant to. There's GLBA, which regulates financial information, so that, again, an organization can't leak out personal loan information or other types of financials to anyone. There's PCI, which everyone should be familiar with, which is accounting for credit card information and making sure, again, that this information stays private. And there's other types of data as well. There's corporate secrets, right? There's strategies, internal documentation, employee files, access that contractors have, data that exists for all of those relationships that you have with both your employees and your and your contractors, the people that you work with day in and day out. All this data also needs to stay, private and stay secret. And that's really what Comodo data protection is going to be about. There's also other types of files that you may need to protect in your environment. So anything from office files to images, plain text, PDFs, there's a wide range of information and where that information is housed in the form of these files that, again, need to stay in your environment and shouldn't be leaked out and compromised. And where exactly does the sensitive data reside? And it's always in one of these three places. It's data in use, applications that are currently open, accessing data, using it in memory. There's data in motion, which is traversing your network. Somebody is copying a file or data from one location to another. And of course, there's data at rest. All those files, all that data within those files residing in a file server, database somewhere, could be on premises, could be remote in the cloud. So the point is that you have lots of data in many, many locations. Now, the issue is that it's way too easy to get data out of your network, right? Hackers can come in, they can, they have a wide range of ways that they can get in. They can, hack directly from the outside, get through your firewall. That's pretty rare. They can, drop USB devices around your environment. You can pick up one of those, plug them into your machine. Might have malware on it, right? Which is going to collect information, collect data, and exfiltrate it out of your environment. There's malicious employees. These are people who are, for one reason or another, want to get your corporate data out, and they will, be busy collecting it, and then of course sharing it with whoever they see fit. There's careless employees. These are users who certainly don't mean to accidentally post data, but that's exactly what they've done. They might take credit card numbers, medical information, whatever it might be, accidentally copy and paste it somewhere, leave some documents out in the open for taking. You never know. And then there are negligent administrators, very lax security posture. What if there was no firewall and people were just allowed in to do whatever they want? Well, that would be pretty bad. So there's a lot of ways to protect, and again, the issue here is it's way too easy to get data out. So the solution is, know where your data is, know what, who has access to it. Doesn't need to be everybody. Know what they can do with it. Are they allowed to access the data? Are they allowed to copy it? Are they allowed to print it? Are they allowed to post it on social media, etc.? And then of course prevent everything else. So you got to map out exactly what users are allowed to do, what they're allowed to have access to, and then block all of the other potential methods of exfiltration. So specifically talking about data in motion, with Comodo's data protection, we can create a number of different web rules to block users from posting to HTTP, HTTPS. And we do this by leveraging a proxy service and using ICAP to filter all of that traffic through Comodo's data protection service. So this way we can look if you are posting to, again, social media. You might be trying to email sensitive documents or sensitive data out to, anywhere. And so we could create a number of different web rules to prevent access to that very specific data, as well as mail rules, passing it through mail servers, again, using ICAP as a transportation method to view and restrict anything that might be going out through the email. There is data in use, and this would be if you have an application open, you're currently working with some sensitive information, what are you allowed to do with it? And you may want to put restrictions on being able to copy it to removable storage devices, USB devices. You may be restricted from printing Excel spreadsheets, Word documents, anything like that. So the printer may be unavailable for certain types of information. Clipboard and screenshots, obviously you may not be able to or should not be able to copy and paste that data into other locations. That might be more easy to exfiltrate that information. Network sharing rules, device policies, so really controlling where you're allowed to save information to. You don't want to save it to just any network share that popped up on the network, but maybe you're only allowed to share it to or save information to those trusted web servers that are there. Data at rest. Now it's also extremely important to know what's out there. So you may want to employ discovery policies and actually search endpoints and file servers looking for very specific data. You may have information that is outdated and documents that have been sitting somewhere in an unprotected machine for years or longer. So doing a general search, knowing what information is out there, knowing where it resides, being able to then apply security policies to either clean it up or protect it from exposure is going to be very important. So looking at where they are, running discovery policies to look for them is going to be an important part of this solution. So a little bit more about preventing data loss. Again, data in motion, data in use, data at rest. How can it happen? Users are accidentally posting things. Users may be accidentally printing to unsecured printers in the area. Users may be trying to copy, paste, etc. And so Comodo's data protection has policies to prevent all of this accidental or purposeful transfer of information from one machine, one system to another. Now, how do we detect different content? There's many different ways to do it. We can use built-in patterns, so we can look for very specific information like social security numbers, credit card numbers, etc. If you really wanted to get detailed and have a lot of fun with it, you can use regular expressions so that you can look for variable amounts of information. Keywords, looking for things in documents such as confidential, secret, private. So you can look for just very specific keywords and maybe a collection of them. Exact file matching, by using a hash of a file, you can look for very, very specific files and protect where those files are allowed to go and what they're allowed to do. And then, of course, partial document matching, which, again, similar to some of the other processes and techniques, is going to look for part of a few paragraphs or a few statements and see if they exist in other documents on the network as well. So a lot of different ways to detect very specific content, and then of course applying that to different file formats. And what type of actions will you take when sensitive data is discovered? So there's a number of things that we can do. We can pass it, which essentially means that we will allow that data to flow, whether it's somebody's trying to print it, somebody's trying to post it on social media, etc. We don't need to log that. Maybe we find that that data is not sensitive. We're just going to simply allow it, and that's fine. We can create a log of the event, which means that we would not block the transmission, but simply allow the user to post it, but we're going to create a record of it. So this way you know who did it, from which machine, and you can go back around and apply more stricter policies if you want to, but at least you have that information logged so you know exactly who is exfiltrating data. There's archive, which can not only log the event, but also create a copy of it so that that's stored in the database. You can go back and retrieve it, you can review it, look at it, see that, okay, this user was able to post the data and here's exactly what they did post. There's also a block, which is very self-explanatory. It's going to block the transmission, and it's going to create a log about it. This is especially when you need to protect very sensitive information. And then finally, quarantine. This is going to block the transmission, and just like an archive, it's going to create a copy of it. So again, somebody tries to post a PDF, a Word document, it's going to create a copy and store that in the database so you can see exactly what this user attempted to post. Comodo's data protection is very easy management. It has a web user interface for the front end. You're able to go in very easily, make rules for source, destination, type of data and information. There's many different types of rules in here, web rules, clipboard, printer rules, etc. USB device that can be applied. And then, of course, what the action is going to be, whether we're going to block it, we're going to quarantine it. So very easy and simple to set this up. On the endpoints, there's a simple agent that gets deployed out to those devices, and they receive all the policies from the server. They're all updated in real time, so as any policy is applied, those devices get the latest policy. So an action plan. So here are some things that should definitely be considered. One is, discover where your data lives. You need to know exactly what you have in your environment. Discovery policies that we have can certainly assist with that. You need to use a solution that can discover, track, alert, and block sensitive data from leaving your network. And so you need a solution that you can trust and a solution that can provide all of these things. Finally, visit Comodo Cybersecurity. Come talk to us. We have lots of people who can assist and work with you on every bit of your security need. And that's it for me. Cassie, I'll go ahead and push it back over to you.
Sure. Thanks, John, and thanks, Chase, again for today's presentation. So now we'll get started with the Q&A session. And we do have a few questions from our audience in the queue. So I'll read through them at this time, and then I'll serve them up to you both to address. So the first question is, do we get a copy of this presentation? And of course, as I stated before, we actually recorded this, so it will be available on demand on Comodo Cybersecurity's Bright Talk channel. And it should be uploaded about a few minutes after the live webinar ends. The second question that we received was, will I be notified if a breach occurs? So John and Chase?
Yes, I can answer. Yeah, this is John. Let me answer that. So absolutely, with Comodo's data protection, if an event does occur, you are logging it. Of course, a notification will go to the IT admins that some data has been exfiltrated for one reason or another.
Great. And the next question is, how do I stop users from uploading to Gmail?
Yeah, also a good one. And quite simply, if you leverage a proxy service, we're able to integrate with that proxy service and be able to see all the information, both HTTP, HTTPS, and so Gmail, primarily using secured HTTP, will be able to look at that traffic, look for very specific types of strings and data that's being transmitted, and of course, if it goes against policy, then that data will be prevented from being uploaded to Gmail.
Great. And the next question is, how does Zero Trust address data security strategically?
Sure. So this is Chase, and Zero Trust has been around since about 2012, and one of the main reasons for John Kindervag's initial formulation of the idea was around data as being the single most important thing in the entirety of security. So Zero Trust is almost entirely focused on enabling security by focusing on controls built around data. And really what one of the main tenets of Zero Trust is figure out, if you look at John's past research and my research, figure out what the data is, figure out where it is, be able to apply some sort of schema to it, whether that's, you know, classified, secret, top secret, red, orange, blue, whatever, some sort of schema, and then be able to control, manage, and lock down that data. Everything else is things that need to happen and things that you should do for the overall security. But for zero trust, to even play in the space of zero trust requires that you are focused on putting those controls in place around data as soon as humanly possible, with all focus on keeping control of that data.
Thanks, Chase. And the next question is, in the journey towards better security, where should data security play for most businesses?
Yeah, that's a question I get pretty regularly at Forrester on inquiries and whatnot. And it's the good thing is that I would say it's very applicable to where you are in your journey towards security anyway. So if you're an organization that has already figured out how to do the simple things like two-factor authentication and multi-factor, you know, zoning and sectioning and microsegmentation and taking care of some of those things on the network and device and user side, the last step is going to be to actually take care of this whole data problem. And personally, I think hardcore data security is the single most difficult piece of this entire thing to take care of, because you're trying to literally isolate, control, and secure what people need to do their job. So it's a very intricate process, but it can be done anytime along that life cycle. Personally, I'm a fan of doing data security at the end of a journey, because that means everything else is already in place, and I know I've got those other sort of simpler things taken care of, and now I can focus on the really difficult, intricate part of data security. But if an organization has the capability and is ready and feels like they have the technology in place to do data security now, by all means, figure out how to do data security sooner rather than later.
Thanks, Chase. And the last question in the queue, where can I test your DLP solution? And I can actually address this one. You can go to our website, cdome.comodo.com, and you can fill out the form in there and you'll be able to test it. So that concludes our presentation today, and I really appreciate both Chase and John taking time out of their day-to-day, as well as all of our viewers, to discuss the importance of data security in today's evolving threat landscape. So if you'd like to learn more about Comodo Cybersecurity's data loss prevention, you can visit the link that we provided in the attachment tab. And again, this webinar was recorded, and it will be available on demand on Comodo Cybersecurity's Bright Talk channel. And with that, we're going to end it for today. And thank you to everyone who attended, and thanks again to our speakers for a great discussion. Everyone have a great day.